welcome to Fischler College of Education, School of Criminal Justice. And my name is Dr. Grace Telesco. I am so happy to have back again, after popular demand, Ed Dentzel from the show Unfound. And, we're doing these Thursday night YouTube live discussions, and we're bringing back Ed again, and we'll be bringing him back again in October and again in November. So we're really happy about it. And so Ed, tell us, for those viewers who haven't seen you before, or heard you before, know anything about Unfound and what Unfound is and what your work is all about. So tell us a little bit about that.
I can do that. Thank you. And Dr. Telesco, it's hard to believe that this is only our third show together because it feels like I've known you for years. For some reason, I think we have really good chemistry, and I enjoy coming on your program. Thank you. Yes, I've been doing Unfound for a little over 4 years. We just celebrated our 4-year anniversary at the beginning of September. This is what show I do is a missing persons program. We've covered about 190 disappearances over the last 4 years, mainly in the United States. We've covered a few in Canada, and we've covered one in Angola, Africa as well. Unfound is what I would call an interview-based program, in that I have family members or other people who know a lot about the disappearance to come onto the program, and we get very deep into the details of that disappearance, getting to know the person who went missing, the circumstances of their disappearance, times, locations, dates, and then also any extenuating circumstances and information such as social media information, phone records, anything like that. And I'd like to think that we go as in depth on disappearances as much as anybody out there. But we've been doing that over 4 years. 4 years. I don't do this alone. I have an army of assistants who help the program in a variety of different ways. I just happen to be the guy who gets to speak into the microphone.
Yes, and you also you're not telling us, you're not bragging on yourself, that you also are screenwriter, actor,
have been, yes,
journalist, all of those hats that you wear, including your hobby of disc golf, right?
Love it. Yes. My weekends for the foreseeable future are taken up with some disc golf tournaments here in the Clearwater, Tampa area of Florida. Yeah. Yes.
And so before the show, we were kind of talking a little bit, just having a conversation about something that's in the news. I know tonight we're gonna focus on one particular case, and and after you finish the focus on that case, I'm gonna bring on two criminal justice majors who are seniors in our undergraduate program, and they're going to come on and they're going to try their hand at a little bit of investigative hypothesis, and it made me ask you some questions. But before we get into the focus of tonight's case, we were talking about something that just is in the news, something very current about a case that you had been working on in the past and continue to work on, a missing persons case where there's some new evidence. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. That's the disappearance of Eric Franks. We covered that disappearance back in about March, I'm thinking, of 2017. So like 3.5 years ago. And I had his mother, Joanne, on at the time. This is a disappearance that happened in Saginaw, Michigan in 2011. And at least to this point, I think it held the record for the longest time between somebody going missing and an actual missing persons report being filed. And the reason is that there was the belief that after Eric disappeared, that somebody was using his social media account and his computer and his phone to pretend to be him. And so although he disappeared in March of 2011, a missing persons report was not filed on him until November or December of that same year. So many, many months later. And it kind of, the case kind of went cold. I think we did a good job on it in 2017. But another main factor in Eric's disappearance is one of the few disappearances we've covered where the person and his or her car went missing as well. We've only we've done 190 disappearances, but we've only covered maybe 7 cases total where that has been the situation. And Eric's was one of those. So I know that I was thinking that there was foul play involved, and probably whoever did that also got rid of the car. Well, it turns out that just within the last 3 weeks, Eric's car was discovered in perfect condition in a garage of an older gentleman who died earlier this year. I think he died in April of this year of 2020. And what happened was that he died and they were having an estate sale. He didn't have any children, wasn't married, so it was kind of an auction. And a guy in Ohio bought one of these cars and took it back to Ohio. And it wasn't in perfect condition. What this guy does is he buys them and gives them to charity for people who need cars. Very noble pursuit that he has. And so he was fixing it up and he went to took it to get an oil change. And when he did that, somebody in California who periodically has been going to Carfax.com to check the VIN on Eric's vehicle to see if it ever pops up, found out that the car had gotten its oil changed in Ohio. Well, this started, of course, a flurry of activity. And what eventually happened is they tracked down the car to this guy in Ohio. And Eric's brother-in-law got to go to this house, walked into this guy's garage, and there was Eric's car. 9 years later, over 9 years later. And it now turns out that the reason that this older gentleman in Saginaw, Michigan, he was like in his 80s, had this vehicle, we can pretty much hypothesize, is that it turns out back in 2011 when Eric disappeared, is that the mother of Eric's daughter was one of this older gentleman's caretakers. And I have more information than that I don't think I can go public on, but I will just tell you that is the way that this older guy came into possession of this car. And in fact, he surely did not know that car was Eric's. I'll just leave it at that. Now, the unfortunate part is this woman, her name is Kendra, Eric's former girlfriend, mother of his child, died of cancer in 2016. However, her husband at the time in 2011 is still alive, and he actually had moved to Florida many years ago. And so this is now a very, very hot investigation. They've gone into the house where this guy used to live, and a new homeowners allowed them access to it, sampling areas in the garage and in the basement of this house to find out if there are any, just to be honest, frankly, any remains, any clues into Eric's disappearance. Now, it should be known that even when we covered the disappearance in 2017, many people, including, I think, Eric's mother, believed that Kendra and her husband had something to do with Eric's disappearance. No proof of that, just a lot of theories and conjecture, etc. But now nobody could have believed that the car would be found in one piece in somebody's garage. I know I was thinking maybe it was in a junkyard or had been driven into a lake or something like that. But now that it's been found in one piece, I don't know if it's given up any forensic information that can help investigators, but this surely even more puts the spotlight on Kendra and her husband, John, back in 2011 concerning Eric's disappearance. And so you never know how these disappearances are going to go. And as I was telling you, and I've said this on my live show that I do on Wednesday nights already, that when I found out about all this, what I did, and I usually do this when I hear about a disappearance, I get on Street View, I go looking into it for myself. And what you discover is if you go to this older gentleman's house in 2008, before Eric disappeared, he had 2 garage doors, separate ones. One was solid. The other one had windows that you could look into the garage. You go to 2012, after Eric disappeared, and the window, the door with windows had been replaced to one that is solid. So, and of course, I would guess that the reason he did that, or he didn't do it, but maybe Kendra and her husband, maybe he said that this guy needed to get a new garage door, is so nobody could look into the garage and see Eric's car there. That's the theory that I would have. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Exactly. But as I continue now, as I've been saying for a while, and I guess Eric's Eric Franks' disappearance proves it. These crimes, if they are crimes, are not perfect because they're committed by humans. You just need to know where to look to see at the right second, the right moment, to notice something like that. And as I was telling you before we came on the air, that had I known the name of the gentleman that Kendra was taking care of, I'm sure at some point I would have thought, let's just do a Google Street View and just take a look at his house, because you never know. You never know what you might see. And I probably a while ago would have noticed that the garage doors were different. That probably would have tipped me off to something, but I guess hindsight's 2020. But I think it would have been a very good clue as to, okay, he changed one garage door, but he didn't change the other one. Why is that?
Yes.
And I think that most of the disappearances out there, not just the ones that Unfound is covered, but all of them that are out there, thousands and thousands of them. I think all of them have like one little piece of information out there that is right in plain sight, except nobody has seen it yet.
Right. So now, are you in touch with the family of the victim?
Of Eric Franks? Oh, yes. I actually had a messenger short back and forth with his mother this morning regarding, some of the articles that have come out recently. I guess there's now a video out that I've not seen yet regarding, I don't know if it was a news report or something from Saginaw, Michigan. And I've also spoken to Eric's brother-in-law. So that would be Eric's sister's husband, who's kind of the point person now, the spokesman for the family. He's very busy. I forget what business he's in, but now he's been getting a lot of calls. So I felt very fortunate that he called me back. We spoke for about 20 minutes, but anything that he and I said would be off the record. But so I have been in contact with them, and I'm here to help in any way.
Right. And so some of these new pieces of evidence that come forward, these new facts that start to develop, gives hope to the victims' families, I would imagine. Sure. Hopefully not false hope either, right? Because you were saying that there's not going to be a lot of forensic evidence that they can pull off of that.
I don't. Yeah, with the car, I have my doubts whether it will have anything, being that it's probably been cleaned. If it wasn't cleaned at the time that whatever happened, it was probably cleaned by this other guy who bought it just recently, and so that would ruin anything that they could collect, whether it's fingerprints or something else. So, but it does give them one more piece of evidence showing that the theory that's been out there for the last 9 years is most likely correct. Something happened between Eric and Kendra at least. And that's how this older gentleman came into possession of Eric's car.
Yeah. And so tonight we're going to focus on a case from November 2018 that you're going to give us a little bit of the fact pattern around and the evidence that evidence facts, case information that we have.
Sure.
That you have, why you're attached to it, and any other, developing points you'd like to make.
Sure. What I'll do is I'll do it the way we usually do so on Unfound, is I will go through the night of the disappearance, and then we'll go back and talk a little bit about all of the things maybe that happened before he disappeared and the investigation afterwards. Okay, so that's how we do it. That's how we usually do so on Unfound. But yes, tonight we are covering the disappearance of Eric Alvarado, who disappeared from Atlanta, Texas, not Atlanta, Georgia, but there is an Atlanta, Texas. And he was at home with his wife, Samantha. And at about 1:30 in the morning of November 20th of 2018, so this is a very new disappearance, not even 2 years old, at least new in Unfound's world. He decided that it's still a little bit unclear, to be honest, but he got the keys to his Jeep from his wife, Samantha, and she gave him the keys to the vehicle. And he goes out to his Jeep, and his two dogs go along with him. And his wife wasn't sure, was he going out to the Jeep to get something, or was he going to drive away to go get something like some late night store, possibly a Walmart, and then come home. Well, he did leave, and he took the dogs with him at 1:30 in the morning. And so he didn't come back within like 45 minutes. And his wife, Samantha, got a little worried, and she called the police. after only 45 minutes. Didn't call, I don't think she necessarily called 911, but just wanted to put it out there that Eric left and she thought he would be back and, very quickly, and he's not back yet. And I think the police kind of blew her off, as happens oftentimes when you get a call so quickly after somebody went missing. Well, Eric didn't come home that night. And in fact, he never came home again. And what eventually happened was that over in Arkansas, just over the border into Arkansas by Texarkana, between Texarkana and Ogden, Arkansas, there was a state trooper out on the highway there, and he came across a Jeep that was along the side of the road on the highway there, just north of the Red River. And as you've seen, I think many times, if you've gone on the highways, at least in the United States, there'll be a car sitting there and there'll be like a fluorescent green or fluorescent red tag on it to kind of date it, to show that, okay, this car was here on a certain date, and if it's not moved by this time, it's going to get towed. Well, the state trooper came across this Jeep and put a tag on it because it seems like it had been abandoned. And then when it was still there later that day, this Jeep got towed to an impound yard in Arkansas. Well, one thing led to another. The police in Atlanta, Texas, finally did take Samantha's missing persons report seriously. And they put it together that this Jeep that had been towed over in Arkansas was actually Eric's Jeep. So it seems that he got into his vehicle with his dogs, and we're not sure if he ever did stop at that Walmart. We'll get into that in a moment. But seemingly the Jeep ended up in Arkansas, and Eric was never to be seen again. What this started was a search of the area. Now we have to keep in mind, once the search started, the Jeep had already been removed. So they had to go out to the approximate area where the Jeep was left. And they discovered, between the family and law enforcement searchers, they discovered a variety of items. First of all, they discovered one of Eric's shoes. Not both of them, only one of them. And his family insists that that is one of his shoes. The other shoe was not in his Jeep. They also saw that the tag that had put on the vehicle, I guess when the tow truck driver pulled it away, he put the tow tag, fluorescent sticker or something, put it in the shoe. So it was in the shoe. The keys to Eric's vehicle were found hanging on a fence near where the Jeep was found. Very neatly put on. They weren't thrown, into the median of the highway. They weren't thrown into a field. Somebody had hung them on a fence right near where the Jeep was. So that was at least a little strange. In addition, if you're wondering about the dogs, and I think this is the only disappearance Unfound has ever covered where dogs went missing as well as a person, but the dogs were eventually found. And by everybody's account, Eric was a huge dog lover, as usually all dog owners are. But one of them for sure had gotten hit by a car and was killed. I've never seen any pictures, but the way April, Eric's cousin, who was on the program earlier this year, the interview I did with her, it looked like this dog had been hit actually multiple times. The other dog was found, and it was found not like right next to the other dog, but in the general vicinity. And it did not have as many injuries as the other dog did. In fact, to hear April tell it, it just had one puncture wound. In fact, she said it almost might have looked like the dog was shot and not hit by a car. But she did admit that there were no forensics done on this dog to see what it died of. It very well could have been hit by a car, could have had all sorts of internal injuries that are not, you can't see from the outside. The skin could be intact, but all the bones and everything inside could be completely crushed along with the organs. You just don't know.
Right.
But those dogs, it is presumed they were both hit by cars eventually. So we now know that the dogs, whoever left the car there, the dogs were in the Jeep, and the dogs were let out of the Jeep, and those dogs were allowed to run free in that area. Once again, on this highway between Texarkana and Ogden, there is if you want to look it up on a map, it's very close to a truck weigh station in that area. And the dogs were obviously there and got hit and got killed. But there have been no signs of Eric at all. In addition, they discovered that the Jeep was out of gas. When they towed it in and then his family went to pick it up, it was totally emptied of gas. And so it had to be, they had to bring like a canister to gas it up before they could take it out of the impound lot. So the searches were done. And like I said, this is a relatively new disappearance. And those were the main facts of the case. We don't have any phone information in this disappearance because Eric had run out of minutes on his phone and had left his phone at home. So those are the facts. Anything that you want to ask me at this point, Dr. Telesco, before we continue into some of the things that were going on before Eric disappeared that could maybe contribute to his disappearance, along with some video information. And then I will explain also why this episode was called Conflict of Interest when we originally covered it earlier this year.
Right. So, I mean, this fascinating case. There's a couple of things that, go around in your mind as far as the theories are concerned. One of which, what makes him leave and not tell anybody, not tell his wife why he left. That's one thing. The second thing is, the dogs. Someone who's a dog lover doesn't just, even if you break down on the side of the road, you're going to be so focused on, the safety, the care, and the custody of the dogs. So that doesn't compute either, which makes it really lend itself to possibly, foul play. So what are your theories on it, and what have you kind of, discovered throughout this process?
Well, let me go into some of the other factors that should be considered before we start talking about what possibly could have happened. Maybe I should have said one more thing about the location where the Jeep was found. The Jeep was found in an area that I would not say, although I don't think I've ever been on that highway in my life, but I've done some street views and satellite views of it. It's not a wooded area. It's not the hardest area to search, although there is a lake of decent size near to where he disappeared. I know that they had several people out there. April talked about she herself being out there walking around looking for information. But this isn't a situation where a guy could have run off into the woods that are right beside the highway and gone 2 miles and then collapsed or something like that. It's just not that kind of terrain. So if he left the vehicle there and walked off, he would have had to have walked quite far before he would get to an area where he would be hidden. If he had something was going on in his mind, whether he was suicidal or something else, he would have had to have walked considerably far before he would come to a place where he wouldn't easily be seen. Not to mention there's no allegations that he took any weapons of any kind with him, whether it's a gun or knife or anything else. So I should state that as well, because we do run into some situations where cars are left behind, but maybe they're on a logging road out in the middle of nowhere, with wilderness all around, and a person could walk off in any direction and never be found again very easily. Not to mention, maybe wild animals, etc. So here's some of the things that were going on in Eric's life that may have contributed to his disappearance, if we are inclined to think that this wasn't he who dropped his car off there and maybe there was foul play. First of all, a few weeks before he disappeared, he and his wife had a roommate who was living with them. Took this guy under their wing. I forget exactly the circumstances, but they allowed him to come into their home and live. And for seemingly no reason, this guy ended up, while Eric was gone and his wife was gone, this guy ended up ripping them off, stealing a multitude of possessions that Eric and Samantha had. In addition, he had hacked into Eric's social media and done a lot of damage there as well. And so they had to kick this guy out. And so this was still something that was ongoing. At the time, I don't know if they were going to try to sue him or take him to court or anything like that. But this was something that kind of popped up out of nowhere. Something that I don't think anybody in his family or Eric or Samantha could have ever expected, that this guy would do this and hurt them the way he did. So that's something that happened not long before Eric disappeared. The other issue that we talked about when I interviewed his cousin April, Eric Alvarado's cousin April, back once again, we covered this very earlier this year, and this disappearance that's not even 2 years old yet. But Eric ran a tattoo parlor out of his house. He was a very artistic person. However, he was also selling marijuana illegally out of his house. And there was an allegation that either he'd owed money to somebody or somebody owed money to him. And in fact, I think somebody owed him money. And once again, not long before he disappeared, the story went, to hear April tell it, is that Eric ran into this particular guy by happenstance, circumstance, coincidence in town, and they got into a fight. Now, you have to understand this. We weren't talking about thousands of dollars. In fact, I don't think the amount was even $100. But these two allegedly got into a fight not long before Eric went missing. And so to add to that, going back to the night that he disappeared, there is a belief out there that it very well may be that Eric went out to go to this Walmart that was open 24 hours and just happened to run into this guy. Again, there's no proof of that, but that is something that has been thrown around, being that Eric did happen to run into this guy days before he went missing, and they had a scuffle of some type. Now, who got the better of who and who broke it up and everything else, we didn't get into that. But because what's interesting, I think, is that his wife, Samantha, called the police 45 minutes after he left the house. So that leads me to believe that she thought he was just going out somewhere and coming back. And the story has been maybe that he was going to get chewing tobacco at 1:30 in the morning. Maybe I don't chew. I've never smoked or anything like that, but maybe people do that. And that's why she expected him to be back in 20 minutes. And when he wasn't back in 45 minutes, she got very worried. Maybe thinking about what happened with this fight days before, or getting ripped off by this other guy, around the same time. So those two stories in particular have added to the idea that maybe Eric was not the one who left his vehicle over on that highway in Arkansas, that maybe he went somewhere, ran into somebody, and got into some sort of scuffle. That person got the best of him, then took Eric's vehicle, drove it out there until it was out of gas in Arkansas, dumped the dogs, not caring what happened to them, and then got picked up by somebody else and came back to Texas. No proof of that, but that is out there right now. Now, there's something else about this, is that we do have video evidence, and this is something else that happened not long before Eric disappeared, but he had a video camera system installed on the inside of his house. There might have been one camera outside maybe, but he had cameras installed on the interior of his house. And one of those cameras captured him leaving the house that night. Now, there are 2 or 3 different videos out there. I have seen, I believe, what we would call the shortest one. It's not a very good angle. It's like directly down the edge of a wall toward the front door. And you can see Eric standing there, kind of half in the house, half out of the house. It looks like he has some type of bag with him that has never been found, not in the vehicle or any search that has been done. At least that's the way it looks. And you see him, you see his wife give him the keys, as she explains, and then he leaves and the dogs go with him. Now, some people have pointed out in the other video, which I haven't seen, is that we all know how when we open our car door that the interior light comes on. Well, you can't see the vehicle. You can't even see the light, but you can see the light bouncing off of something. And people have pointed out that, the light isn't on very long for a grown adult to get into the vehicle. It's just like it's only happens for like a split second. And if that is, as you would imagine, caused people to think, well, maybe Eric didn't get in his vehicle at all. Maybe he went out there and opened up the door, then shut it real quickly again, and maybe something happened out, right in his front yard. Once again, no proof of that, but I've not seen that video either, but that has been out there as well. But we do have video of that night showing that Samantha did give him the keys and that he went out to his Jeep. But it's one of those issues. We always hope that we get video for a disappearance, but sometimes it seems when you get video, that only adds more questions. It only causes more theorizing and conjecturing, not less. It's
Right.
amazing. It's amazing how that works. But I've seen the one video, the short video. Now, the longer video, some other people have seen it. It said that these people have said that Eric was pacing back and forth as if nervous before leaving that night. Once again, I've not seen that video to be able to give you my impression of it. So we have these things going on that certainly have added to the rumor mill. In fact, when I interviewed April, I just listened to the interview again recently to, kind of catch up with the information so I could talk about it for this show tonight. I even asked her, any idea, why so many rumors have been out there regarding Eric's disappearance? And, I don't think that she's quite sure. For me, I think it's probably because he was in a shady business doing something illegal, which means he was running into other shady people and cash is exchanging hands. And that can always cause problems. There's no proof of any of that caused Eric's disappearance, but it certainly, in our experience at Unfound, adds to the rumor mill. It only causes more rumors, not less.
Right.
So
right.
that may be the reason.
Yeah, in criminological theory, right? When we teach a course on victimology, let's say, we look at some of the classical theorists who explored and examined victim precipitation, which in some circles it's been criticized as like victim blaming, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to blame the victim, but clearly there's something circumstantially or lifestyle or something that's going on here that has sort of motivated the facts as they've unfolded. So is it victim precipitation? Perhaps. And you've mentioned some of the possible shady business that he might have been involved in. But do you find in your work that when the victim may have contributed in some way to their consequences or demise, or the fact that they're missing, that somehow devalues the investigation?
Not from our standpoint, but I think from law enforcement standpoint, we've covered people who have never broken we've covered disappearances of people who have never broken a law ever. And we've covered the disappearances, frankly, of drug dealers, people who were major illegal drug dealers in the areas where they lived. We at Unfound don't care. We cover everybody equally. We put the equal amount of work into all of these disappearances.
Right, of course.
But my perception is that certainly when it comes to law enforcement, especially if it's people disappearing from smaller jurisdictions where the police might know that person just from previous run-ins, that the police they take the report. It's not like they deny taking the report, but after that, I would say there's not a lot of work done because I think there is the attitude, well, this woman was involved in prostitution. So not necessarily she deserves to go missing, but she's an adult. She should know if she's getting into something like that, bad things can happen.
Right. So this is sort of the consequences of your deviant action, kind of, not that you get what you deserve, sort of, but we're gonna focus our attention on more serious cases, or cases where, you know, there's none of this victim precipitation going on or contributing factor.
Yeah,
Um,
there's, I guess I'd put it this way. There's a reason that every child disappearance is taken seriously, but not every adult disappearance is taken seriously. And one of those reasons is because you don't have any child, drug dealers out there. You don't have any children who are continually breaking the law by raping women and everything else. You know, every child for the most part is innocent. So they get they get attention all the time when they go missing. Whereas with adults, have baggage.
right.
And I think that baggage contributes to law enforcement kind of giving themselves an out, saying, well, this person probably took off. This person has a transient lifestyle anyway, yada, yada, yada.
You were going to talk earlier about something to do with law enforcement in this particular case.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us about where that conflict of interest?
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. This episode, when it came out earlier this year, was called Conflict of Interest. And of course, the theme could have been a variety of points regarding Eric Alvarado's disappearance. But I chose that one because what's interesting and peculiar, you are the former police officer, not myself, Dr. Telesco, so you can give your opinion on it. But the main investigator into Eric's disappearance was his next door neighbor. And there was already a jurisdictional issue in this case because Eric lived in Atlanta, Texas, but his car was found in Ogden, Arkansas. So there was already this conflict. Ogden, Arkansas didn't want to have anything to do with the case because they could say there's no proof Eric was here. And then Atlanta, Texas was saying, well, we don't have anything to do with it. Well, his car was found in Arkansas. He surely drove it over there. Well, it ended up is that Atlanta, Texas now it has the proper coverage for is responsible for his disappearance, but the first investigator was his next door neighbor. And one of the problems, once again, I'm not talking out of school. I covered this topic when I spoke to Eric Alvarado's cousin April. She talked about this, that the investigator, I don't believe, was the most ethical. For example, not long after Eric disappeared, and I know this is going to, of course, raise attention for a lot of people out there, Samantha ended up getting a new boyfriend, even though she was still married to Eric. And Eric's father was not happy about this, thinking that was fairly suspicious. Eric's father goes to the investigator and voices his suspicion that maybe Samantha was involved in Eric's disappearance. What does this police officer, the next door neighbor, do? Goes and tells Samantha, which, like I said, does not sound like the most ethical thing to do. Not to mention, as I've already stated, Eric was conducting an illegal business out of his house. Are we to believe that this police officer living next door didn't know that that was going on? And on top of that, if you can believe this, on top of everything else, at some point, this investigator said, oh, no, I saw Eric leave that night. So the main investigator is a witness, or at least claiming to be a witness to the disappearance. Yet this investigator was allowed to work on this disappearance until, believe it or not, he got promoted. One of the probably we talk a lot about it in law enforcement. I would not say that we are pro or anti law enforcement. In the program, I think that we cover it honestly. So we applaud them when they do good work, and we don't applaud them when they don't do good work. This is one of the stranger stories regarding law enforcement that we've had on Unfound. Maybe close to the strangest, maybe not the strangest, but certainly one of the more unusual law enforcement facts that we've covered in 190 disappearances. So Dr. Telesco, what do you think about that?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask you a question about what's the size of that police department.
I don't know. Atlantic, Texas is not as big as Atlanta, Georgia, but I don't know how many people in law enforcement. It's not some, I grew up in Leechburg, Pennsylvania. Population, at least when I lived there, like 3,000 people. Atlanta, Texas is bigger than that.
Right. So it's interesting to know how many how many detectives, they actually have assigned to that particular department. And it's just like not likely that, the next door neighbor who probably knows the victim is going to be the detective or the investigator on the case. It just doesn't make any sense. And then beyond that, we talk about something called confirmation bias, which, the investigator gets it in his head or her head. This is the guy, this is the perp, this is the suspect, and doesn't want to see any other evidence to point them in a different
Right.
direction. So, one needs to ask the question of what kind of a relationship did this next door neighbor / investigator have with the victim? Is there
Yeah.
anything good about that?
I don't think that I don't remember April saying anything that stated that this investigator, the next door neighbor, and Eric ever had any problems. Not to my knowledge, the way I remember it. So there's nothing going on there, but
there has to be, like, when you where I live, I know my neighbors on either side of me. I may not be having them over for dinner, but I know them and I say hello to them, and I know they're pretty much their whereabouts, their comings and their goings, when they put their trash out, like all of that stuff. I don't know what the geography is there. If the next door neighbor, how close in proximity are they?
fairly close. I think there might have been a hedgerow or something between their homes or something like that, but you can listen to the interview for yourself. When I spoke to April, she states that at some point this investigator said, "Oh, well, I saw Eric leave that night at 1:30 in the morning." So that close enough to see Eric leave, if we're to believe it.
Close enough to see Eric leave, and close enough, like, why is he happens to be up at that hour, looking out his window, or that just seems very odd to me. It's a great term that you've used here to for the show, conflict of interest, because it sounds like one.
Yeah, I think that it taints the investigation to a point. Now, you should know that I think the Texas Rangers did eventually get involved, but they're not the main, to this day, they're not the main investigators. I think they're just in a support role. At the most, I think that Eric's family has spoken to somebody in the Texas Rangers about the disappearance, but Atlanta, Texas is still responsible for the investigation into Eric's disappearance.
Right.
Although, like I said, this investigator is not the number one person anymore. The problem is that it may even be the wrong jurisdiction. It may be that Eric actually did disappear if he dumped his own car over in Arkansas. It might not even be the correct jurisdiction, but we run into that a lot on Unfound, a lot of jurisdictional issues. Somebody lives one place, their car's found someplace else, and it's like each jurisdiction wants to play hot potato. No, I don't want it. You have it. No, we don't want it. You have it. Nobody is really laboring to want to take these disappearances on. They're trying to push it off to somebody else.
They have a very strong lead and a suspect in their sights, and then they want then
it's the opposite. Yeah,
war. Exactly.
Yes,
exactly.
I should maybe one more fact regarding this that I think is important regarding the dogs. If you were to watch the video, you will see the dogs, and one of the dogs is wearing a sweater when the dogs were that night and when they left. However, when the dogs were found later, the dog that had that sweater on did not have the sweater on. And in fact, all the searching they did around, of course, they found the shoe, they found the keys, all these things. They found the dogs themselves. The sweater that dog was wearing has never been found.
Yeah, that's interesting. The keys on the gate or the fence are also very telling, that there's other people involved, obviously, in this disappearance.
Could be.
To me anyway. But Ed, I want to go to one of our viewers for a moment who asks this question. Dr. Telesco, can you provide a lesser known example beyond drug use of victim precipitation, please? Great term, she says. Now, that term is not coined by me. That term is coined by the criminologist Wolfgang. And there's some other examples, like the elderly, for example. So if an elderly person goes to the bank the same time to cash their check every single week, then that becomes something that's telling to the defendant, to the suspect, to the perpetrator. So there's an example of victim precipitation, that they're contributing to the criminal behavior. Not that
they get into a pattern that people
Right.
can figure out. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's an example. Someone else is saying, and this might be one of your followers, Twinkle Designs. I think small towns have more of a rumor mill, and perhaps when a person is participating in illegal activities, they're connected to people who are questionable and may not share truthful information. That's an excellent point.
Yeah,
Excellent
that is
point.
true. That's true. I grew up in a very small town, so I know how that can be, and that is the difference between us covering disappearances in small towns comparison to covering disappearances in large cities. We've covered a couple disappearances in Las Vegas, for example. You don't get the rumor mill going in Las Vegas, whereas in these smaller towns, it seems like it's a lot more prevalent. True.
So I want to bring on two of my amazing students, my criminal justice majors. They're seniors. They're part of the undergraduate criminal justice program here at Fischler College School of Criminal Justice at NSU, Joshua Enfinger and David Troxel. And if I could have them both come on now by sharing their video with us. There they are, David and Josh. And so real quick, and they're seniors, so they're about to graduate. So I know that Josh, raise your hand, Josh, so we know who you are. Josh is interested when he graduates with his criminal justice degree to go into law enforcement. And he wants to do it at a very high level. He's interested in possibly, tell me, the FBI, DEA, what else?
I mean, of course, I feel like the dream for everybody, and I guess to kind of clear it up as well, law enforcement is of course just the beginning, because I know you got to start somewhere, and small start's always a good start. But basically, I want to be a forensic investigator. So that's why every time I've seen one of your show eds, I always get super excited. And throughout the show already, I think I have like 10 questions that I've been trying to like keep up with to see if I can answer myself on my phone. But eventually I want to work up to the FBI level, DEA, work for a smaller CSI level in like a higher city, or even like the CSI FBI agency. That'd be cool, of course.
Yeah.
Cool.
And David, your interest and your background?
My background, I have a lot of military background, of course, as Dr. Telesco knows. And my interest is more of the big picture. I like to look at and sift through all the details of a case and try and pick out things that somebody else may not have seen, and go through all of the evidence and the crime scene photos and all of those things, and try and piece the case together.
Well, here we're going to give you an opportunity right now to be the investigator on this case. You've inherited the case. You've heard the facts as Ed has described them to us, and I'd like to hear what your theory is. What do you think, Josh? You want to go first?
Oh gosh, it's actually so funny because, like I said, of course, being like from forensics, and of course, with like I'm thinking about that proportion of it. I mean, there's just so many different things here that I was thinking of. Like, I was going to ask you if there was any signs of blood, any signs of like a struggle, testing like the fingerprints on the steering wheel, possibly saying if like what happened is maybe someone told him to get in the Jeep, and somebody else was driving the Jeep, and once it ran out of gas, they had to take on foot. So of course the dogs, he was probably trying to get the dogs. And I remember when we were first talking, I wasn't sure if they were like flattened with tire marks or like the bullet holes. So, of course, I feel like that would let me know like what kind of instance we're working with. And of course, the questions coming up of, possibly a dirty cop next door, he was working with him. And, of course, being trained in law enforcement, they probably know more so of, how to get away with a clean case. Cause I'm not saying I'm a professional, but, all these shows nowadays that we watch, I feel like probably half these people know not to leave like a certain glove behind, or, if you shoot your gun, pick up the shell casings at this point. So, I mean, of course, going from the drug point at this point and possibly a dirty cop, because you've got to know that smell. You got to know the sights of that if you're trained. I mean, so just from like a quick perception, because I don't want to drag on too long, it's probably drug perception. I would say being that close with, I know Texas is bigger than I'm probably imagining, but that close to Mexico, there could have been some big people who got upset with something that he probably did, as well as like if he took longer trips than he told his wife that he did. Those people have no remorse. They're psychopaths. They'll take their gun, they'll take a knife, they'll take whatever they have to do to threaten somebody. They'll kill anybody.
So Ed, what do you think about that?
Mhm.
Well, it answered his question, his theory. What do you think?
First of all, you should know it's interesting that you bring up Mexican cartels, because that came up in another disappearance we just covered within the past month. I hear about it a lot behind the scenes, but we have really there's no evidence that has contributed to any of the disappearances that I've covered on the program. I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
Mhm.
But I could tell you that's often something when drugs are concerned. When I talk to family members behind the scenes, they'll say, well, we've heard this rumor that the Mexican cartel could be involved in this or that. The problem is it's just a rumor. There's no evidence of anything like that. And in fact, as a good example, you can think maybe of these this huge amount of family members, I think 11 who were murdered up in Ohio a couple years ago. And the first idea was that the Mexican cartel, because these people were in the marijuana business, Mexican cartel went up there, murdered all these people and got away with it. It turned out in the end, it was another rival family who was kind of connected. I think maybe the son had been dating one of the daughters, and it was just bad blood between the families. These 4 family members went over, killed 11 people in 3 different buildings and got away with it for a couple years. So even when we think it's Mexican cartel and a lot of people were killed, in the end, that's not the way it usually goes, but it could be. There's no evidence saying that didn't happen in Eric Alvarado's case, but there's no evidence that says it did. Now, I should say something regarding the dog and the bullet hole. There's no proof that was a bullet hole. It looked like a bullet hole from a very layman person's point of view. It very well could be that could have been a piece of metal on a car that punctured this dog when it got hit. And it just, like I said, had internal injuries that are not obvious from the outside. Very possible.
Right.
Of course.
Okay.
Mhm.
So David, what you want to weigh in? What's your take on this? What's your theory? Do you have any questions for Ed?
Well, my theory is kind of along the same lines. I'm looking at it as this could very well possibly be a domestic issue that obviously has many facets to it. It could be a domestic dispute. It could have been, between other neighbors or other people that he knew, seeing how, selling narcotics is obviously illegal. With that brings a lot of shady people. So somebody could have grabbed him outside of his home and someone else could have driven his car off. We don't know. I think that the evidence that has been presented, maybe they should do a little more exploring into that. They should have looked into the death of his dogs to see if, like you said, is that a gunshot wound? If so, there would be, evidence to that, whether it's gunshot residue, a slug that's still in the animal, and other things like that are better left to trained professionals well beyond my capabilities.
Yeah.
But there are definitely some interesting things going on with this case that just don't seem quite right.
Right. Good.
What I would say to both of you, being criminal justice majors, is that if you're both going to go into law enforcement in any capacity, is I think one of the things you're going to be most amazed by when it comes to missing persons cases is how little forensic evidence there is. Rarely in our program do we talk about forensic evidence, being fingerprints, blood evidence, anything like that we think is forensic evidence. Rarely do we do that. On our program, we're mainly talking about cell phone information, pings, social media, who saw the person first, locations, times, and trying to put timelines together, because usually in disappearances, there is no forensics. The other thing regarding vehicles, especially in Eric Alvarado's case, and this probably will amaze both of you, usually families get missing persons vehicles back within 24 hours without any forensics ever being done. Wow. That is common. That is standard, no matter if it's a small department or a large department. Very rarely do we talk about a vehicle that sits somewhere and they luminol it and everything else, and then the family gets it back a month later. I can name several disappearances, if I had the list in front of me, of disappearances where the person left in a car, the car is found, and the people, they just give the car right back. It's if the disappearance never even happened. And that's not quite what happened in Eric's case, but it was almost that.
Right.
But that's probably going to amaze you. You get into law enforcement, that's probably one of the things that's really going to surprise you, because I know it surprises my listeners every time we talk about it.
Well, and one of the things that that our students here probably already know is that there's this, CSI effect. Everybody watching, Law and Order and all these other kinds of Hollywood portrayals of
It ain't like Hollywood
cases, and it isn't like that at all. It's just sort of
No.
common sense facts that you kind of you get a lead and then you follow through with it, and how witnesses are so important, how invaluable canvassing for witnesses is. So I'm going to let you guys wrap up, David and Josh, with any other questions or ideas that you might have. By the way, Natasha is saying,
Nice.
if anyone has seen Ozark, the Ozark series with Jason Bateman, and places the Mexican cartel front and center.
Right. That's right. I think that's also why it continues to pop up, because people see that program, and that's how entertainment shapes reality. For sure.
Exactly. So
Sure.
Josh and David, any other questions or comments to Ed?
Well, Ed, I'm honestly, I'm shocked that basically what you just told us, how a lot of these vehicles are returned to the families. And I would urge any and all family members of any of missing persons to try and take an active role in the case of their missing family members. And if they were to get any kind of vehicle or any other evidence back, to have that conversation with the police department and urge them to test it forensically, because you never know what kind of evidence that can be missed.
Exactly.
Excellent. Great. Josh?
But yeah, no, that it's funny. It's so hard to think aside, because like I said, every time we read these, we go into class or we read these books, it like you said, it's so much less so of us, knowing the mental capabilities of like tracking and following this. That's just like the very specific job scene. So of course, like forensic part always comes to mind. And like David said, of course, I feel like I always go straight, like I would think of straight with the dogs at this point, like trying to figure out like what it was with the dogs, one thing I said, I know it's always Hollywood and stuff. However, I have kind of seen this, on like those shows, but when kind of how David brought up that it could have been, between the husband and the wife, that with you get scratched, there's still the stuff in the fingernails. So I was always thinking, maybe one of the dogs tried to bite off somebody, so you could always check like the teeth but off the forensic side, of course, since, you said kind of ignore that for now. I think it's just crazy and fascinating that you have to use like the tracking and everything, and you kind of have to throw out the big picture thoughts, and you kind of have to just think on the inside and looking for those small clues and finding that little bit of luck that you need to get through that case or get through that day of, investigating.
Right.
Missing persons cases are much more, showing my age. Missing persons cases are much more like a Columbo episode than a CSI episode.
Exactly.
For sure.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
One of your followers, I think, Twinkle Designs, right, is saying so many assumptions are made in these cases. Broad assumptions need to be broken down into finer detail and looked at, in an outside of the box way. What do you think she means by that?
Well, I think that too often investigators and family members get tunnel vision. They become very set on a particular theory, and then they try to get the facts to fit the theory, when really it should be the opposite. You should just be going out there looking for information and trying to prove that. If you hear a rumor, can it be proven? If it can't be proven, then you have to discard it. I hear too many times people still, years later, still hanging on to theories and rumors that have no basis in fact.
Right.
And to me, that's a waste of time. I'm not saying that didn't happen,
right,
but if you don't have any information, then you got to push it to the side and just look at the information that you have. And I see a lot of tunnel vision. And I think that's what twinkle means, is that, you know, what thinking out of the box means in missing persons cases is, you know, not accepting a theory just because it sounds good.
Right.
You
And
know,
so
it
that's
fits,
interesting
you know.
because I was saying earlier about the police have a tendency, investigators have a tendency of confirmation bias. And it
Yeah.
sounds like victims' families also can get caught up in
Yeah.
tunnel vision theory or a tunnel vision, you know, approach to the facts of the case.
Yep. I have those conversations very often with family members, trying to remind them that, you know, it's been 20 years and you're still on the same theory. I'm not saying the theory is not true, but there's been no movement. Maybe it's time to open your mind to other possibilities. And maybe, you know, like the Sherlock Holmes idea, you know, try to rule out anything else that possibly could be, and whatever is left is the answer. So, you know,
Right.
maybe you have to do things the opposite way.
Exactly. So Blaze Fairchild,
Mhm.
probably
I know
another
who that
follower
person is. Yeah.
of Ed's
Yeah.
of Unfound, says families often beg for the car to be processed. Can you speak
Yep,
to
they
that?
do. They do. That's true. The problem is that, once again, for you criminal justice majors, the big problem with missing persons cases is that they all look the same at the beginning. At that first 24 hours, the person who is only going to be missing for 3 days because he went to Vegas and partied it up and then came back looks the same as a disappearance of a guy who leaves and never comes back. And so what happens is that when law enforcement or the family gets involved, they're already behind the 8 ball, to put it. You know, they're already behind because time has passed, and time is the biggest issue with missing persons cases, because we don't get to rely on forensics. So we have to rely on where people were at a certain time. Well, you don't get to that person till a week from now. You know, sometimes people genuinely forget.
Right.
And so, that's just the way it is. And so that's one of the big problems we have in missing persons cases. They all look the same.
Yeah.
99 out of 100 come back after 3 days. And then there's that 1 out of 100 that remains missing forever.
Right.
And if police were to do forensics on every car that is connected to a missing persons case, every police department in the United States would be out of business.
Yeah.
Because of the money and every time and everything involved.
Yeah, you bring up a really great point about time of being of the essence and following the leads, where they take you, so to speak. So Ed, once again, you know, every single time we have you on, we're just learn so much more about missing persons, about these cases, about the intricacies, so many things that are learned. I appreciate you taking out the time of your busy schedule to be with us. And how
You're
proud,
welcome. You know, I love talking to you, Dr. Telesco.
I know,
That's no
I
problem.
know. That's great. I love talking to you, and that's why we're going to have you back 2 more times for this series.
Great.
Anyway, and I just want to brag on, you know, my guys here. These are work study students. They are part of something called the Sociodrama Community Initiative. And so they work behind the scenes on a lot of the stuff that we do here at Fischler College of Education School of Criminal Justice that I'm involved in anyway. And how proud are we of these two, right? That they're seniors, they're criminal justice majors. They make our college and our school look so good. And so I appreciate them being on. And I'm going to ask them to say a little goodbye to the viewers. Anything in one sentence, if you wanted to say something about the School of Criminal Justice and any of our programs, anything that you'd want to just share with them real quick, like a sentence or two. Josh?
So, I mean, honestly, I will have to just say I went from being a chemistry major to a criminal justice major because of the professors and because of the change I felt like I could make through the different majors. So this is why I've switched to criminal justice. I've loved the professors way more. I've fallen in love with the school and my learning process ever since then. And like I said, I went from probably sitting in a lab typing for 5 hours a day, probably disliking what I do, to now I'm probably going to be in the field talking to people like Ed and Dr. Telesco, trying to figure out different cases, different thought processes, and ideological issues that we can all frame one by one.
Great, thank you. And David?
Well, I would say that we have a phenomenal criminal justice program here. And honestly, if it wasn't for Dr. Telesco, I would have never joined this major. I came in as a computer technology major, and it only took one intro class with Dr. Telesco to get me to change my mind and join the criminal justice major. We have a phenomenal program.
Well, so you can see that we have a mutual admiration society going on. These four squares are loving on each other, right? So Ed, I'm going to give you the last word. Thank you again for joining us tonight. Anything, Ed, that you want to tell your viewers or our viewers?
Absolutely. You can find Unfound on iTunes. You can find it on Podomatic, Spotify. I think we're also going to be on Amazon Music here very shortly. The episodes come out every Friday, so we have one coming out tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. Tomorrow will be the disappearance of Douglas Jones from Simpsonville, South Carolina in 1997. Please find us on Facebook, the Facebook page, the Unfound Podcast discussion group, which has like 8,000 people in it now. And I also do a live show on Wednesday nights on YouTube at 9 p.m. Eastern. It's free for everybody. And if you'd be interested in contributing to the show, please go to patreon.com/Unfound Podcast.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being on. We'll see you in October. And thank you to all our viewers. Don't forget, if you liked anything that you saw tonight, please make sure that you subscribe to our channel, to the Fischler College of Education School of Criminal Justice YouTube channel, and hit the bell so that you get the notification. And please make sure that we support Unfound and all of the broadcasts that Ed does. Thank you again, Ed.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Thank you.
Strong.
Good
Thank
to see
you to all of you. Okay. Thank you.
Good night.